guest, James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com and several other sites which we'll be talking about. James is a DIY, do-it-yourself upstart who's been producing his own media for, I believe, 5 years now.
Something like that.
So we're going to talk with him today about, why he got started and how he's been dealing with this do-it-yourself aesthetic and how that's branched out into these different viewpoints. So James, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
So maybe we can get started with some background on who you are and how you got started on this path to putting out media that tries to wake people up.
Well, yeah, because I think the background kind of at least sets it up and kind of shows that there is an interesting thing I feel like I've experienced, that when you look back on your life and look at your interests and experiences and where they've led you to, you can see a pattern that makes sense. You can go, oh wow, there was kind of a theme throughout my life for whatever reason. And I can say that it went back to, I remember I used to play music for my G.I. Joe guys. Like, as I would set up the scene, I was already sort of like putting soundtrack music to the scenes. And I had a record player as a kid and only a handful of things, but because I wasn't allowed actually to buy music or go to the movies or things. I had kind of a conservative Christian upbringing. Not super strict, but I wasn't allowed to, go see those movies or listen to some of that music that, friends my age were doing. But of course, trying to keep a kid away from something, that's really only going to make them, want it a lot more. So as I got older and started to kind of break through that wall, I guess, and that goes through essentially, when when Dad stopped going to the church, that of course lets, me and my brother say, well then, Dad's not going, why do we have to go? So once, that, I don't not get too much into detail. And I'll preface even all that by saying, I love my family and have a pretty close, and great relationship. And I don't hold any kind of amazing grudges or there's no, this isn't a big, dark, evil, kind of secretive thing.
It's the natural progression.
It was the natural progression. So once I was allowed, to go to movies and to start to listen to music, it was, of course, I dove in head first because I felt like, I had been kept away from it. So I was so excited to get into it. This would also basically be the point right around when, basically VCRs and video stores were everywhere. And so once I could go to, video stores and then record stores and bookstores in the mall, and coming from small town, southern West Virginia, I'm from a town called Fayetteville, West Virginia, that, if I wanted to go to the mall or the movies, I had to go, 20 miles away to the mall that had the movie theater and the record store and all that kind of stuff. And that became pretty much almost, ritual for myself that, I took the money that I made delivering newspapers and mowing lawns to go buy CDs and go see movies. And I did a lot of that just even by myself in high school once I was able to drive. Like, it wasn't necessarily hanging out with a bunch of friends. It was like, no, I want to go to Camelot Music because I know da-da-da new tape or CD came out. So when I went to college, and I went to college in Shepherdstown, West Virginia, which is still within the same state, but about 5 hours away, about as far away as I could kind of be away from home, but still get, of course, in-state tuition and still be relatively close. It's about an hour away from D.C., so that opened up that whole world to be able to start going to, shows and events and things in the capital. But I basically went to the school, for a handful of reasons. One, my brother was going there, so that, of course, made an easy transition, and I kind of knew folks there already, which made it easy in when I got to that town. But they had a college radio station, an independent record store, and a single-screen art house movie theater. I was like, sold. I love all those things. So the minute I got to school as a freshman in college in the fall of '95, just probably a few days after I actually turned 18, I got involved with the radio station immediately. And over the years, I basically kind of muscled my way in, and I, kind of did a better job out from under some of the folks there and became the music director at the station, which is WSHC. It's 89.7. It's a 950-watt non-commercial radio station, and I know I always kind of thought it was kind of small, but then the more I talked to other folks and looked around, I was like, no, actually, that's pretty sweet. Some colleges don't even have a radio station, and if they do, it's, just either a closed circuit and you can only get it on campus, or just such a small, broadcast range. But I basically, when I became the music director there, I sort of blew the format wide open, whereas some of the previous folks had been so dogmatic with, it has to be indie, it has to be punk rock. If it's on a major label, it automatically sucks, and would even, burn some of the discs, and just a kind of a hateful, closed-minded attitude. So I kind of came in and was like, no, we're going to play punk rock like we always have, but we're also now going to play bluegrass and electronic and jazz and hip-hop and all kinds of stuff. Some of it, yes, may be on a major label, but some of it may not be. And it was amazing, the kind of feedback, like once, because it was a small enough station, essentially, that I could kind of take it over, for lack of a better term. As far as the regular kind of rotation and sound of the station. Now, of course, there were shows that hosts would do, and of course, they could do their own show and their own music, and I never interfered or messed with any of those, because that was somebody doing their own passionate thing about whatever genre they were into. I just kind of did the overarching, rotation and sound of the show. But to hear the response from, 14 to 40-year-olds and beyond that dug the station and heard, it's like, wow, I never knew there was that much, cool new stuff out there.
It's motivating.
It was really motivating and really, kind of amazing and exciting. So while all that was going on, I also kind of hooked up with some friends who are still good friends to this day, and we started to play music together and started to kind of do experimental, instrumental, ambient, electronic, drone, that kind of style stuff. We were never, let's learn, a cover song that we can play. Mm-hmm. And I kind of pulled them into, which was my minor. I was a major in communications, and that's where the broadcasting angle came from. My minor was in theater with a sound design emphasis. So all the while doing the radio station thing, I was also kind of taking over doing sound design for theatrical productions that the school would put on. And they would do at least 2 a year, and they were all, student acted and run, and you had, again, people who were passionate about it and people who this day, are pursuing a career in, theater or the lively arts, if you will. But it took basically hearing what I thought were, bad soundtracks to plays. They were just like, oh, wow, you just dumped some Beatles and Radiohead songs and played them. And even if it wasn't that basic, it was still, I always felt really obvious choices and songs that had so much baggage. And, oh, yeah, I know that. It's on a commercial or it's on that movie. So I took, kind of tried to take that over, essentially. And I did it while I was in school and did it for credit. So it could keep me out of the shop, because I didn't really want to be in the, the theater shop using saws and things like that. I would rather be squirreled away, editing and remixing music and stuff. So I pulled the band into doing sound design for theatrical productions, and we did some original scores, and we did some live things, and it got to the point where I was, it was a sort of big fish in a small pond. And also bearing in mind that this was still kind of pre-YouTube and the explosion that we have now. Mm-hmm. Yes, of course, video and those things were there, but it wasn't quite podcasting, and we were right on the cusp of all of that. However, in the background, post 9/11, while I was essentially the media guy and the radio guy, and people would stop and ask me, what was that song that da-da-da? I started to look into 9/11, and it was only through my own natural curiosity, this also being around the time that I had access to my own computer with dial-up internet, that my own question, and you maybe, I've probably said this on my own show a million times, that it was my own natural question of, what's the video of the plane hitting the Pentagon look like? And it was just out of my own curiosity of, like, to, consume media and all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And we had seen, all the other footage. And so it was once I tried to look that up that you instantly then realized, oh, we don't have anything? And then it was pretty much, I guess, off to the races. And then I just, probably the first thing was like the Dave Von Kleist in plain sight. And that was really intriguing. But even that on the surface, I was like, this is intriguing. There's something here, but I don't know that this is it. Like, this seems a little specious and odd with the pods and all that stuff. It just didn't strike me as plausible then. And I don't know if it does to this day, but that's neither here nor there. But it was when I saw, Alex Jones' Road to Tyranny that had kind of a broad spectrum of things, not only 9/11, but also Oklahoma City and a lot of, those related things that had a bit of a wider, focus.
And the ideas of false flag anything in the first place, right? It presents that whole can of worms about misrepresentation and deception.
So it was it was something I did in secret, basically, was start to research and consume all kinds of what was, then still new alternative media. And that was just at the point when lots of documentaries and I guess, then Loose Change and all of those things started to come out that I suppose I started to talk about it with some folks, but again, it was, and I think you can extrapolate this out more, that you kind of want to do a little bit of research before you go running off at the mouth about stuff that you haven't even, kind of comprehended. So I think I also kept it to myself for that reason, and also the reason that in 2003, not too many folks were talking about 9/11 truth, much less, acceptably.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, so just through your own kind of natural curiosity, I guess that turned you on to these different subjects. And then, like you said, you're trying to go through and navigate towards the truth of the matter. And so you would come across different kinds of media, I guess. And, did you have to develop your own kind of deeper sense of critical thinking, or did you find it just came naturally that you were able to discern the weird alien stuff versus like, oh, there's this Federal Reserve thing and it doesn't have our interests?
I think there was just, and again, I think coming from, this background of when I was pretty young, just kind of researching and I've spent a ton of time looking at the backs of VHS boxes in video stores as a kid and looking at the liner notes and taking in all of the kind of related data that I feel like then I got more in depth in when I would do, media studies in the communications department with that sort of media literacy. So I think having the kind of encyclopedic background and taking in all that kind of data and remembering like, oh, I know that, Touchstone Pictures put that thing out. Why? Because it just kind of, lodged away in my head and I remember that. So then as I take on these new pieces of information, I guess a bit of the discernment maybe just came kind of naturally.
Or start seeing the connections, or they're more readily evident. So you guys should field some questions.
I've had a question that that I wanted to ask you. How do you talk to people about some of these issues without scaring them away, so to speak? Because I have family that, just actually last week was here, flown in from Ontario, and we started talking about some of these issues in it. And, my aunt was telling me it's very overwhelming to take all this in, right? So, looking to you, how do you sort of, talk to people basically without scaring them away?
Yeah.
Getting that glazed over look in their eyes.
Yeah, exactly.
One or the other, glazed over or running away.
Yeah.
I think something like that probably comes, with time and with practice, because I'll totally be the first to admit that as you become, awake to these things, and we say that kind of jokingly as, that being awake isn't like a switch that all of a sudden, oh, I'm awake and I fully, comprehend and take everything on. It's everything's
sort of
a process.
Exactly.
But I was, totally guilty of that sort of immediate alarmist effect that you can get from Alex Jones of that, holy shit, it's going down tomorrow. Martial law is coming, tomorrow. And I probably, and that's what you're saying. Maybe how do you not scare people? That comes with time, but also maybe they're hit with a lot to process because maybe they are being talked to by people who have just started to wake up. So they come to them with, oh my God, I have to tell you, and they're, whoa, that's, you're talking a lot of stuff for me to kind of take on there. And I know probably early on, showing, I probably started to talk a lot even with, with my family. And the nice thing, I guess now to this point, and I think you guys would probably all agree that in a way, it's gotten a lot easier to discuss a lot of these things anymore because for the most part, I'm not bringing a lot of the things up. Because, at work, I work in a very social kind of environment. It's a grocery store, but it is an independent, Oregon-only chain. And the sort of whole mission statement and vibe of it is, our motto is the friendliest store in town. It's that idea of whatever I can do to make customers happy, we'll do it. We bust open, we sample food in the aisles. We'll give you it's something you won't really get, I think, at any other kind of grocery store. And it's part of that vibe that you can spend 15 minutes talking to a customer and even longer. And you're not going to have your boss in the background wondering what you're doing and not get, It's part of just kind of the whole ethos and vibe of the place. So there are a lot of opportunities to discuss, these issues and all kinds of other things. Because of course we're in a grocery store in a pretty, progressive area of the country. So there's a lot of, food and health issues to discuss, and we can get into that in just a little bit. But I try also, I don't, ultimately it is still my job, and I don't want to be at work and be like the conspiracy guy that I want to be viewed as always kind of spouting off and always talking about this stuff. And it's funny because some folks, a lot of, I don't keep it a secret, what I do. Of course I talk about the website and the show and try and promote it. But a lot of folks who I know have never checked out the site or the work think of it as that it's this weird, underground, he does this crazy conspiracy, internet thing. Whereas if they actually took the time to go look at it, they would go, oh, he's just kind of posting articles that are, real and adding, kind of extra elements to them to kind of flesh it out.
Giving context.
That's what I want to, try and do. But anymore, man, I think it's people coming to us and asking us and bringing things up. So in a way, I almost don't have to kind of bring things up with folks. They're brought up, and they're brought up kind of naturally. So again, being in a grocery store, when someone complains that, where are the nori sheets? Like, where's the seaweed? And to remind them that, ever since that massive nuclear meltdown, haven't been able to get them in as consistent. And it's like, oh yeah, I forgot. Those events are going to affect what I would typically think, it's a store, it's the shelf. It'll be on the shelf. I go pick it up.
Yeah, we take it for granted.
Yeah, you'll never be eating seaweed again.
Well, I think one of the issues too is that, people often see that they can't fathom the fact that there are people who are benefiting off of them all the time. So it's like, I can't fathom or comprehend that people don't have my best interest at heart, and I think that was one of the expressed, comment that was made, that it's just like there are people out there that are profiting off of people who are not so fortunate, so to speak, So I think that's one of the things that, it's not, it can be perceived as that, but it doesn't necessarily always have to be that way.
Well, and if people are in a position where they're not as I don't want to say awake, but not as aware or educated as to what's going on around them, it's that much of a steeper hill to climb to try and get some traction, and then be able to be like, okay, now I can start putting some ideas on that. If you're stuck in a survival mode the whole time, you're just struggling to put food on the table, you're probably not going to have the time or the inclination to start looking into all these deeper issues, even though learning your way out is kind of the main solution. So we're going to take a quick break here, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about how James has created not one but 4 different powerful websites that are aimed to help teach people about these different areas of perception and bring some awareness so that they can make some better decisions, I guess.
Empower themselves.
Yeah. So we'll be back in a few moments. Thanks. We'll make a joke out of it or something. We'll be like, all right, and we're back on Remedy Radio. James Evan Pilato is our guest, and he's decided to give us the skinny on things. And he's narrowed, we're going to focus on the straight and narrow. And so tell us about your weight loss secrets. No, it's eating correctly. Maybe we can start off with, you run MediaMonarchy.com, you run FoodWorldOrder.com, you run CyberSpaceWar.com, and your new site, Holy Hexes, gets into some pretty controversial stuff. But I think the most pressing thing for everybody, because it would be health, food, world order, and what kind of food we're eating. Because if you don't have that foundation, getting into anything else is kind of like a waste of time. You're not going to be really thinking straight if you're not eating properly. So what inspired you to start Food World Order?
I think it honestly originated from doing the live show, my live weekly show here on the Portland Radio Authority, and covering some food issue that was posted on MediaMonarchy.com, my flagship and first site. And I think I just coined on the air, in just kind of speaking about this story, Food World Order. And even when I said it, it was like, oh damn, I like that. And I think I made a little note of it, and I went home and registered that URL, registered that domain that afternoon. And instantly knew, it was like, well, this can be the spot where I will focus on these issues. So things that I maybe would have posted to Media Monarchy, or maybe even not have, because maybe in the grand scheme, this wouldn't be, oh God, I have to post this thing. But if you give it its little, niche, that can be its home. And I would definitely say that so much of it is a learning process. And so much of it probably started when I did move to Portland, and that's been about 6 years ago. And the short version is I followed my girlfriend out here. And she and I had been together and have been together for a long, long time now, and met back in school. We were in the same major and minor, so we both are, passionate about media and production and live production and all of that stuff. But in, moving out here with her, and like I said, moving to a place that's, more progressive, that is already, slowly but surely, moving into a more of, local food movement, it became, that much more apparent and that much more important. And did I think when I moved out here, oh yeah, I want to get a job at a grocery store, that's what I want to do? Absolutely not. I hit up the local corporate, radio stations and TV stations just to try and get some kind of job out here, because it was difficult moving, somewhere where I didn't really have too many connections. But I think the way things worked out and getting the job with the company that I do work for is one of those places in the city that folks say, when you work there, they're like, oh, awesome, I love shopping there. So getting
I
involved...
used to stop there every time I was in Portland. I know what place you're talking about.
Okay,
so.
and I've never actually, I think, on any kind of broadcast or on the air, mentioned the name of the place that I work. You can find it out, as of course, it's been amazing to have people stop me in the store and say, you're James Evan Pilato. I was watching your videos with James Corbett. And that's awesome. Now happened probably half a dozen times, and I think it blows, both of our minds that we've run into each other there. Mm-hmm. But I guess I just don't mention it not out of, oh God, I don't want people to know. Because, of course, I use my full name. I don't use pseudonyms. I do it more just out of a separation, in that I don't need the company I work for to be going, yeah, this guy, he's got these weird websites and is always mentioning us. I do it just to kind of keep things, separate, but it's not out of it like any secretive thing.
You mentioned Corbett. Was he one of the individuals that influenced you at all into sort of this type of issue, or who are some of the people that you would say influenced you into moving towards some of these topics that we're talking about? Yeah.
Do you mean food issues?
Yeah,
specific?
Yeah, food issues, Media Monarchy.
Well, I would first say, the food issue, again, would be my girlfriend, first and foremost, easily. And,
cool.
And having that kind of education and having that person to go, hey, that's really kind of bad, like that.
You're not going to eat that, are you?
Yeah, read those ingredients and becoming more aware. And then the second would be, having worked at the store, again, with the food issues. But Food World Order, as website, came after Media Monarchy. But as far as Corbett, I think I've got him. I started, I think, a couple years before he did, and we more or less connected up. I think I don't know who contacted who first, but it was probably in 2006 or 7, just to say, hey man, dig the show, keep it up. And once it kind of started there, then I think as my site started to grow, I think, and probably once I launched Food World Order, I think he had me on for an interview, and I think even ultimately titled that episode of the podcast Food World Order, to talk about food stuff. So once we had done an interview once, and then I think I had him on my show to discuss an article he had written about the cyber 9/11 and this software company called P-Tech and all of those issues and the drills and the computers and all that stuff. And just as we kept in contact more and more, I don't know who hatched the idea of doing the weekly, video series. I'm sure it kind of grew organically, or I could probably dig back and there may be an email to show that it was like, oh no, it was Corbett's idea. But the name was my idea, and I'll tell you, I don't know I'm sure folks do know this, but I don't really. It's one of those things if you don't mention, it's that much cooler when people kind of discover it. And again, I'll say that's what I enjoy doing with all of my media, whether that's the radio show or the podcast, or I also do what I call mixtapes. Because again, I'm a radio guy, and I'm still passionate about music.
Mixtapes.
I've published 9 of them so far, Media Monarchy mixtapes, and they'll be thematic, hour-long or more music shows.
That's awesome.
It's cool.
Yeah.
But the name New World Next Week, do you guys, Paul, do you know the answer?
Yeah, I've heard the story, but you can tell these guys.
Okay, there is a weekly just audio podcast from the Council on Foreign Relations called The World Next Week.
Yeah.
And so the title is a play on that, and even if you see the little graphic that comes up, that's my Photoshop remix of the CFR podcast logo. So awesome. I mean, as far as James has been an inspiration. I had started to do the shows and things before that, but as things have now gotten bigger and more accelerated, because again, as we've all, I think, probably kind of been doing what we're doing, the technologies and things keep growing and accelerating. So, then there's, like I said, YouTube and podcasts and videos and Skype, and we can record these conference calls. And as all those things grow, and then I see the work that other people do, it constantly, kind of inspires me to keep doing stuff and keep kind of growing and morphing. You, Paul jokingly said, and I think we were during the break, that I was going to give you the Skinny. Skinny was actually the name of the last show that I did back east on WSHC, and it was an hour-long remix show where I took, audio, radio, samples, clips. I used the turntables, the tape decks, all those things in our studio, and even would grab, live feeds, because at that point it was like, oh, Shoutcast has all these crazy channels that I can grab. And that was the place that I started to take samples of alternative media and 9/11 Truth and Alex Jones and stuff. And I basically started to put that in on not only my show, but I programmed in I would rip the audio off of documentary files that I download, BitTorrent or Napster or whatever we were using at the time, and run the audio from, truth or documentaries late at night on the radio station. But I was able to do it and kind of program it in a way to where it was like you could plant it there and walk away, and it was never like, hi, I'm James Pilato and I'm playing this audio from 9/11 mystery or whatever it may have been. So that music show, Skinny, that I said, I started to use a lot of media mashup kind of things. And I do have some of those episodes are up. That's kind of, it's been one of those back burner things that I've got, 4 years, I think, and like 75 episodes of, these crazy psychedelic mixtapes, basically. And again, so as I've
to the future in a sense, right?
That the things I've done in the past have kind of logically led to the things that I'm doing in the present. That present may now be in the form of alternative news, alternative news, politics, conspiracies, and cover-ups, like I say on the show. That is the form that it's in now. But in a way, I guess for me, I've always been passionate about either creating or manipulating or promoting or using media in tons of different ways. So whether that was the things I could do with the band or the things I could get into plays or the things I could sneak on the radio are now the things that I can make a video about, or that now we can have conversations about. I can make, interviews and mixtapes and audio shows and things. It's been a natural progression, I guess.
It's inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, we're going to take another quick break, and we'll be right back on Remedy Radio with our guest, James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com.
Amazing show. James Evan Pilato joining us today on Remedy Radio. Communicating solutions is what we do, and we wanted to touch a little bit more on one of the sites that James has, which is Food World Order, and some of the remedy that's provided on these sites, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think, again, as we were kind of talking about how as things are obviously accelerating in the world, and you don't have to be a crazy conspiracy theorist to go, man, things are getting pretty strange, that the food issue has become, more and more of, a front page, and I think becoming more and more, front in people's minds as they go to the store. And whether that's even on a, simpler, kind of more basic level, to be able to discuss with, again, folks at the grocery store that, hey, did you notice that they didn't change the price of that product, but they slightly altered the size, and they made it a little bit smaller. And you can't really tell by a quick glance, like, for example, 5 pounds of sugar, kind of what that looks like. But take that down to 4 pounds and put it right on the shelf there, and it looks exactly like it kind of always did. But now they're paying more for less, and even the New York Times did an article, and that's the kind of thing that I do have posted on Food World Order. It was inflation, food inflation hidden in tiny and tinier bags.
Yeah, incrementalism. That's what it is, right? We don't notice when it's in tiny little increments.
And people aren't going to notice that as quickly as they would when they check out and go, Jesus, look at that receipt, even though they're doing that now as well. Mm-hmm. So for me, Food World Order is as much, a process and education. Like I said, I'm not the healthiest and most model, person in the world, and I don't want to try and act like I have it all figured out and I'm telling people, what they should do and eat, because coming, again, from a place where I can get, discounted and damaged things sometimes, what do they call it, a freegan? It's like, well, I would never really buy this thing, but if I can get it because, it just expired yesterday, or it's caved in and we can't sell it, I'm like, oh, yeah, definitely. But
why not?
Trying to make those decisions, and again, I would put my girlfriend first and foremost in my own education and ongoing process of eating better. One of the things we also do that, again, I think we're lucky with the area that we're in, there's a service called Organics to You, and they will deliver local, organic, in-season produce to your door on a given schedule and size. So say we're just, a couple, and we get, I think, the small box every other week. Now, I think a family of 4, they can get a larger, more frequent. It's a different, subscription kind of set.
Yeah.
But to know that every other Monday, a box of local organic produce is going to show up on the door is a great way to then think about what you want to buy in the store. Because then if it's like, well, we have A and B, okay, if I pick up C, we'll have a good meal worth of, tonight and tomorrow. One of the other things, again, with Food World Order and with my girlfriend, I think we have it set up to where the feed of the site spits out onto her Facebook page, because I think Facebook will basically only let you import one feed. And I've kind of monkeyed with that before, where I actually made kind of a master feed of all my other sites, but it ends up, because Facebook doesn't really update in real time, and it ended up just being this bombardment of stuff that I know that it's like, oh, now people are just going to block me. But she has that as her only kind of feed, so that's been a great way that the stories that get posted to Food World Order, I know, go out on her Facebook page, and it's something she's already interested in, and it then makes the easy door opening for her to have discussions with her, whole set of friends and community. So that's been a great way. And again, I think we're talking about just kind of using these tools as, the best we can, as most we can, and all the while knowing that, oh God, Facebook, it's not like I really want to put all that much stuff on, we know all the horrible things about a lot of these, companies.
Yeah, exactly.
That don't have our best interest at heart.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
Yeah, and so speaking of having our own best interest at heart, you've got a site that I try and check out as often as I can, which is Cyberspace War. And, since most people are probably watching or listening to this through the internet, and it kind of seems to be the one communications medium left that is somewhat still decentralized and where people have a somewhat equal voice, what prompted you to start focusing on that enough to have an actual site?
I think, it kind of organically grew through the things that I was already covering on the radio show, which, and to just kind of tell folks, I basically use the site and now sites to generate the content for what I'm going to go over on the radio show. So I basically, it's a current events and news show, so the events and the biggest things of the past week are the things that I'm going to cover. It's, I guess, a week in review kind of show. And in trying to cover all those different areas, because again, as we said, on all these different areas, it seems like things are kind of accelerating, and there is so much information, and there is so many things kind of happening all at once. It probably, again, just kind of grew from naturally being discussed on the show to then thinking, oh, if I give this its own site too, like Food World Order, then I can cover these kind of issues. And I was able to get, I had a guy on my Facebook.com/media monarchy. When people, add as friends and do all that stuff, there was a guy who kept kind of posting articles, but writing kind of lengthy, pieces about them. And I was like, dude, why don't you do that over here, on the website? And then that'll automatically spit out over here on Facebook anyway. And so I do have one guy, Alan, he's in Omaha, and he posts and writes stories on cyberspacewar.com. That's been the idea and the hope, and it's been a hard process, and it's been a slow kind of process. The idea being that with these and all the sites is to get folks on those sites posting and writing things. And again, in a fairly, consistent kind of timely manner, where I'd love to have, a news story a day on each of those sites at least. And if I can have somebody on Cyberspace War posting something, and if I can get somebody on Food World Order posting something, that then, frees me up to then kind of keep, keeping things moving and growing, and not doing the I have to do even the ground level HTML stuff.
Yeah, well, and being able to turn your audience, or at least part of your audience, into contributors themselves, it maximizes, the value not only of what they're receiving, but then in turn that they can give back and have their voices heard, and it gets that whole discussion going. It's just a much more interactive experience. You don't have something like that on TV or with these old traditional mediums, whereas the internet, who is a fan of a show can become part of that show. That's the
thing. So Cyberspace War, I guess, kind of has two main, areas of that title that it kind of goes into. And Alan more kind of focuses on some of the a lot more kind of esoteric, alternative history, even perhaps a lot of, ufology and strange events and things in space, really, about, whether that's Comet Elenin or some of the strange weather events. And I guess there's times for me where it's a little too coast to coast, and that's why I'm kind of vying.
Well, yeah, you've got that whole range of the unknown, right? So, but if people are going in with a certain amount of critical thinking, they'll be able to discern, I think.
I don't think you should be prejudiced against the green lizard dudes. Personally. They got a place too.
And I also don't want to be a jerk and and not be appreciative of the work that Alan does, which I totally am. What I really need, and what would be great, is then it's like, okay, if he's got the space angle covered, then I just need somebody else doing more of the cyber angle with cybercom and hacks into Lockheed Martin and all of those kind of issues. So that's again the process of it.
Yeah, and as you grow your audience, you grow the potential people who might want to contribute. So that's always a positive thing. Okay, we're going to take another quick break here. And when we come back, we'll touch on one of your newer sites, which is called Holy Hexes, and we can kind of get into what made you decide to branch out into that fun and controversial subject of religion and different symbols. So we'll be back on Remedy Radio in a few moments.
Stick around. All right, well, thanks for sticking around. Remedy Radio, where we have James Evan Pilato talking to us about some of his websites and some of the topics and issues that touch everyone on Earth. And I think that's what sort of brings everything together with Remedy Radio, and how it shares a lot of common ground with a lot of people out there who are moving towards empowering individuals, right?
Yeah, and education is one of the most empowering things you can do. So that's kind of the work that you're doing, James, is educating people to the broader circumstances in the world, and then giving them the contextual information. I think that's one of the most important things. So one of the larger sources of conflict these days seems to be religious strife, conflicts between different ethnic groups and in different religious groups, and just people's own I don't know, not consequences of faith, but their own crisis of faith, I guess, in whatever religions that they find themselves in, because they're finding these labels increasingly restrictive and being misrepresented. And so I've noticed that one of your newest sites is called Holy Hexes. And, what is Holy Hexes about, first of all, and what inspired you to create it?
The name, I have to give credit to, whereas all the other names I either came up with myself, or actually, again, my girlfriend came up with Media Monarchy. The name came from, I don't know if you're familiar, and if you're not, folks, definitely check him out, Reverend Billy, Rev Billy, of the Church of Stop Shopping. And they do kind of street theater kind of protest. He's basically sort of like an evangelical kind of half Elvis impersonator, half like street preacher, and they'll do actions where they've performed exorcisms on cash registers in the Disney store at Times Square, and they have choirs that sing. Think about if basically Adbusters, Buy Nothing,
or Charlie Beach
had a choir and a preacher. Like that's kind of what it would be like.
Yeah.
I had an interview with him last year when the West Virginia mining disaster happened, and that's something that hit me right where I'm from. And my dad was actually there on the scene after it happened, so it was something that personally kind of affected me. So it was something I covered in pretty great detail on the show. Reverend Billy had happened to leading up to that point, he had been doing actions against J.P. Morgan Chase, and they're funding pretty much of the majority of what's called mountaintop removal mining in not only West Virginia but Appalachia in general, where they took a voyage to West Virginia and some other places and gathered up dirt and what they called murdered mud and took it to J.P. Morgan branches in Manhattan and built these little mountains in some of the ATMs and, made it street theater and a protest. So I had Reverend Billy on, and it was, I was able to get in touch with him, and it was one of those great things that aligned really quickly of getting him, on the line and getting the show out and being able to discuss that. It was a term he used of putting a holy hex on J.P. Morgan with regards to their funding of mountaintop removal. And I just ultimately liked the idea of those two things that don't seem to go together. Like when you make a phrase, that has two seemingly kind of contradictory things, like a Clockwork Orange, something very mechanical versus something very organic and real. I liked the juxtaposition, showing that it can be about positive, spiritual things in your own, awakening and enlightenment and journey in this world, just as it can also be about horrible pedophile priests and all of the disgusting things that go on in the world of religion. And it was amazing that it seemed like, right around the time that I started to do it, and again, starting each site, of course, gets easier and easier because I've already kind of got the blueprints for them, and the sites generally all have the same look and feel to them, that it seemed like as soon as I had launched the site, it was like, oh my God, there's no shortage of content for this site. This kind of to happen right on time, I guess, as it seems, with 2011, that we started the new year with these weird mass animal die-offs, and it seemed to be all these kind of weird apocalyptic omens going on, and then even up to just 2 weeks ago with the rapture and all that stuff. So it's a site that again, with coming from a religious background, is another important area I think that I wanted to cover, and I do have someone there. Steve in London has been helping out on that site some, and again, it's just been that slow process of bringing folks on to help out. And again, I try and always make sure I cite most of my like I said, holy hexes came from Reverend Billy, but my sort of motto that I've taken on, that I kind of say at the end of the shows, that for a while I think I was always kind of saying, from Webster Tarpley, he would say get active or get radio, but has, kind of not negative, but it has that vibe of like, oh, geez, that's something scary. But what I really like as the motto of the show, I heard from Jello Biafra, who was the lead singer of the Dead Kennedys, which again was part of my awakening at this same point that my brother and I were kind of getting into alternative. He had a shoebox hidden under his bed right before we were able to, to listen to all kinds of, and that's where he had Minor Threat and Dead Kennedys and all that stuff. That again, I'm always thankful to my brother, I think, for turning me on to, alternative music, especially. But Jello Biafra, on one of his spoken word albums, said, "Don't hate the media, become the media." And it was like, that's it. That's the single kind of easiest crystallization of, again, what I've seen in the logical progression, as it seems, through my life, of the media and be, involved in, whether it's the dissemination of, or the analysis of, or the manipulation of, all of those things. There's a word used, and I even registered the site that I never actually did anything with, but there's a term called partipulation, to participate in your own manipulation, and that gets into all the sort of like Edward Bernays and propaganda and all those kinds of things. But there's a group, they only made one album, they were called the Emergency Broadcast Network, and they used a lot of illegal samples and chopped up videos and things like that, and actually U2 took them on tour for the Zoo TV, and that's a whole other story about negative land and all that kind of stuff. But I guess maybe what I'm saying too is I find just as many intriguing connections within the sort of pop culture world, whether we're just now talking about Negative Land or Emergency Broadcast Network or Jello Biafra, and all of those things just as interesting as the world of talking about Lee Harvey Oswald or who connects to that and those kind of realms. Maybe in a way, if I don't know if it simplifies it or not. I'm torn in a way sometimes between the work that Media Monarchy has kind of become known for, and that's, giving you a lot of news, in kind of bullet forms, but hopefully with context that you can go do research, and it's all posted up on the site, and I show, all my, sources cited and all the things I'm finding. Torn between, in a way, being the news guy, which can be difficult to keep up with, to say the very least, which again, like I said, that's why I've been wanting to get more folks involved in the site and just haven't been able to kind of keep all of those things going. Torn between being the news guy, but also being more true to what I know I'm passionate and really good at, and that is talking about, things like navigating Netflix or the Media Monarchy mixtapes and things that, again, are a little closer to what I'm knowledgeable.
And they're more like an artistic expression more than commentary. Like you've got the commentary, which is more the analysis of events, but then the mixtapes and something like navigating Netflix it's both commentary and expression, because you're able to put forth a whole bunch of perspectives instead of just here's the one perspective I have on this one piece of media this week. People can keep reflecting back on these other ones. So we're going to take another, our last break here, and we'll come back and close out on, we'll bring up navigating Netflix and talk about what other solutions and remedies you think people can find. So we'll be back in a few seconds.
Stick around. So thanks for sticking with us on Remedy Radio. We have James Evan Pilato from Media Monarchy, touching base on a lot of different topics that empower us all. One of the things that we wanted to touch on is, I think it's a creation of both.
Yeah, it's really James and Lisa talking about Netflix and then pooling together their recommendations on the tragedy and hope community. But there's this thing, navigating Netflix, and James, why don't you tell us about it?
So I think it was already a discussion group within the tragedyandhope.com community that once I kind of saw it in there, I was like, ooh, now that's something I could kind of get into. And I started to post up. It's basically a forum to post, recommendations for things on Netflix. The idea ultimately being of the group, as well as the coming soon, podcast and video and show, is that there's so much on Netflix, but it's not being, shown on the front page. Because, of course, they're a corporation and they're going to show the biggest, best kind of stuff that's going to grab interested customers. So that's why all the, most mainstream things are going to be on the front page. But there are some unbelievable things that you could not only, get on a disc, which has been difficult in the past, but now you can even, watch it and stream it instantly. And what have they I think said now that Netflix even maybe accounts for a third of web traffic now.
Wow.
But for me, I think this idea, and I think, I guess it was my idea to say, let's make a podcast out of this. And it's basically, I think, kind of going to be a book club, sort of, or a review show. The idea that there are an amazing amount of movies out there, and documentaries and films and shorts and shows that do, I think, as we say in our description, that, illustrate reality, but aren't marketed as such. So for me, again, that kind of, as we've just kind of discussed, the sort of thematic elements through my life as I go, oh, wow, these things all kind of make sense that I'm doing what I'm doing now, because I've seen the steps throughout my life. That navigating Netflix is, something I'm really excited about, because it seems like the next kind of great step, and the distillation of, the news and the politics and the conspiracies and the cover-ups and the current events, on all the main sites, but also with my own passion for media and the art of, film and cinema, and also, documentaries and shows and music and all of those things. So to be able to put those together, for me, I'm really excited about it. And I think using that kind of platform for something that, as we said, everybody's using Netflix in one way, whether they're just streaming stuff or if they're also getting discs in, as well. To be able to turn folks on to, things they maybe wouldn't watch that they would really enjoy, or things that they maybe have watched that have an extra element that, of course, you're not going to get the full story about from what is probably, a fairly large budgeted, Hollywood-style production. That there may be a bit of the story there, and that hopefully we can add the subtext and the context to kind of flesh those things out.
Absolutely, yeah. It's providing that those other connections to other pop culture and media and current events and historical events, and it's almost like I picture it as like a you can watch a movie with the director's commentary, and so it's almost like that, like, but more productive than Mystery Science Theater 3000. Instead of catcalling, we can either be exposing fallacies or pointing out correlations to other films, or if we ever review like a Kubrick film, we could just have a field day going through all the symbolism, and just trying to expose people to the fact that film as an art form is not only all these other smaller art forms, other art forms coming together, but that it's a fully multi-dimensional art form as well, because you can extract so much meaning out of films, not only on first viewing, but say you watch a film 10 years later, you're a different person. So your perceptions and what you evoke from that film are going to be different as well. So it's definitely a worthwhile thing to navigate. And if Netflix is the most efficient delivery system right now, then I think it's going to be a worthwhile show.
Uh-huh. And it makes for a catchy, clever title that I'm always a fan of. And it was available as a URL to buy, so I instantly was like, navigating Netflix. Yeah, let's $10 to register something that may bear fruit and grow into something amazing. Is a pretty easy investment for me. And again, a lot of that helped on by the audience and the folks and the friends and the communities that I think we've all been able to just kind of slowly build, that can make little donations, that things like that, you can kind of take care of. So fortunately, I'm not, paying for the domain names. The donations can kind of take care of that. So I'm at least not, going into debt, trying to run the site and show. But for me, and I, like I throughout all this, I've kind of referenced, this sort of pop culture things that display, something a whole lot deeper, that, Jello Biafra, don't hate the media, become the media. But as far as, solutions and things like that, and, hopeful, ways to move forward, The Simpsons. I'm a huge Simpsons fan. And those are worth whole episodes of analysis of all the strange things that are within those shows and the predictive programming that has gone on as the show's been, going for 22 years. But on an old episode, there was a Halloween episode where the advertising came to life and started to destroy the town, the billboards and the statues and things. And the way to defeat it was, one, you had to write a catchy tune about it, but it was the idea of just don't look. And if you don't empower these things that don't have your best interests at heart, then hopefully, if not physically, then at least metaphorically, they're going to break and smash and fall apart because they don't.
If you don't give your attention
that power anymore.
Yeah.
So I think for me, again, I'm fortunate, but it's no accident, I guess, that in my life I've tried to consciously make decisions to, hopefully lead the kind of life I would kind of hope to lead. And again, so much of that has been thanks to, my girlfriend. She and I, over the last 10 years, have made, decisions with each other about things that we don't want to be involved in. And so, yes, we're still in a city. We still exist and participate in this capitalist America world in 2011. But I don't want a car. I'm not going to drive that. I'm not going to consume that product. I'm not going to give my money to that. I'm not going to pay a service to use resources to temporarily lower the grass that grows out front that isn't really native here anyway and doesn't do anything for us and just takes up space where we could actually be growing food. Like those kind of simple things in modern life are just like, oh, the landscaping services. I hate those things. I can't wait till maybe the positive things in maybe the shifting, economic, social settings in the world hopefully can lead to positive things, that we can get rid of, the landscaping and the wasting gas to temporarily lower some grass. But also, let's take over the golf courses. When all the malls fall and fail, let's, take those over and use them for something more positive. That if hopefully participation in things can hopefully make things happen.
Yeah, stop giving our energy and attention to these non-life supportive, businesses and organizations and even individuals who are, they're just, it's not helping further anything life supportive in society. So, what use is it to give it our attention and energy?
Yeah, I think, and it brings us to sort of the next point of non-life supportive things, which are life supportive things, which are some of the things that we do to sort of escape and relax, and which was one of the questions that I had for you, James. What do you do to relax? What do you do to unwind, to sort of step back from it all?
I'll be the first to admit that I have a hard time sometimes relaxing. I'm kind of a animated, over caffeinated kind of guy, and I have a hard time getting to sleep sometimes. And then the moment I wake up, I want to get out of bed and then go check the news and start a pot of coffee and maybe listen to that song that was in my head or look something up. So I'll admit I'm not the best at relaxing. I think my general demeanor is fairly even keel, but there is just a sort of, I think, just a kind of energy to being excited about. I just constantly want to be checking things out and learning things and looking and listening to things within, the art and culture world, for better or worse. But to relax, I do really enjoy, there's a site and a radio station called Soma FM, and I love their channels. They have channels that are basically ambient drones and electronics. They have one that actually live mixes mission control audio with ambient and electronic music, live on the air.
That's cool.
And I really enjoy, them as much, listening to it, because I think as the years have gone by, and I don't know who said it. Somebody said, instrumental music lets me hear myself think, but sometimes instrumental music, even, just ambient and drone, I can really, that helps me relax. I'll dim the shades and turn off all the lights and chill to that. And then the other, I was going to say I like the model of Soma FM, much like I like the model sort of Red Ice Radio. The idea that it can be listener supported and you'll get so much of the content for free, but if, you participate and share a little bit, you can get even more. But I also like to take walks. Like I said, I don't drive. I do take the bus, if I'm going to work or somewhere else away, but I walk, 90% of the time. And that can be, relaxing. It can also be maddening because there are cars and crazy people and in the city, but live in a fairly nice neighborhood within the city. So it's nice to just go for walks and kind of enjoy, now, the leaves and the sprouts and the, flower petals and all of those things as, stroll around the neighborhood. I do enjoy that.
It is important, I guess, then, to a certain extent.
And hopefully, we'll see we'll run into a cat on the way, because I love cats, but we don't have, we don't have one. There's a part, I don't want to keep a cat locked up in a city apartment, but if I can go out for walks and, and see, cats to kind of play with and pet and, those kind of simple things.
Chances are you won't run over a cat when you're walking.
Exactly. And those kind of simple things, I think those kind of simple things do kind of recharge me. Like there's something very simple about just kind of petting a cat and, smacking his butt while he runs around your legs and, look up at the sky, and those kind of simple things can just be even if they're very short and very fleeting, can be like, okay, things are beautiful.
Yeah, they ground you back to reality, because a lot of the work we're doing is sort of virtual in the sense that we're taking in information from hopefully, a somewhat vetted source or source that we can trust, and interpreting it and converting it and reiterating it in a sense, not so much as a cynicism. We're not just trying to repeat it through our own critical thinking and give it back to our audiences in a way that hopefully it's even easier to understand than when we took it in the first place. You know what I mean? Each layer of context we add is meant to clarify it for the next people that get the information passed on to them. So, and questions before we wrap up this episode, my friend?
Well, I'd ask, I guess, who influenced you, and who would you like to give credit to for helping you along your way?
Well, I guess within the world of Media Monarchy, Richard Grove was an amazing, I'm glad and lucky that somehow, some way, I saw that Project Constellation recording when it kind of first was put out there by Maria.net. And having that, that really helped me, realize that I wanted to turn just a, website that I copied and pasted some news onto, that I wanted to kind of expand it. And it made sense still coming from a radio background. I was like, oh, I could do like a podcast. And so being in touch with him early on, has meant a whole lot. And then all the other folks out there who I don't even really know, who are tough to keep straight because, they may have some name on Yahoo, but there's something different on something else that's tough. It's like, oh, you're the, Steve in Oklahoma. It took me a while to kind of get it all straight. All those folks are amazing to kind of realize like, oh, wow. I don't know how you kind of found the show, but it's amazing, that you're there, and I feel humbled by it. As far as, the sort of like heroes or artistic heroes or pop culture kind of folks that I've looked up to, I'm a huge fan of Morrissey, Orson Welles, and Woody Allen, and I find all those folks were kind of a singular, stubborn vision, and they've always done the things they want to do their way. And their work, they're, I guess, sort of auteurs, that their work as soon as you see it for the most part, or hear it. And yes, they flirted with, they've had some degree of mainstream success, but they seem to exist in a world where they've kind of transcended it. And they don't, I guess it just feels like they're not sellouts. And that kind of means...
they still got their credibility.
And of course, we can break down Woody Allen and all his stuff, and that's, let's all start to look at each other's lives and discuss weird things that may look unsavory to other people and all that stuff. I don't really care if Morrissey's gay or not. And I don't really care who Woody Allen married. There are things in people's lives that are maybe kind of strange to you, or I wouldn't do that myself. And God, Orson Welles, he turned into a big fat, jerk. But it's their work. It's their work that I love, and their work that I admire, and I think they seem to be the kind of folks that kind of stuck with their vision for better or worse, and and are able to exist and create on their own terms, I think.
Mm-hmm. So with that being said, I would like to thank you very much, James, for being a part of Remedy Radio. I was looking forward to seeing you online, and you're just a great person to interview. I mean, you've got so much to say. And I'm just so delighted that you could be here today. So I think I could speak for all of us. So when I say that,
thank you. No, I appreciate it so much. That I think being conversational with folks, I think, is far more effective than bullhorning them on the corner.
Yeah, it was definitely good to have like a good discussion and expose people not only to your work but to the reasons behind it. And hopefully people can get inspired to see how you're doing it yourself, and how people are inspiring you. And hopefully we'll have some guests in the future who will tell us about how they were inspired by Media Monarchy to start their own media.
And we hope we can have you on the show again very soon.